Close your eyes and picture southeastern Turkey. The landscape rolls in gentle waves of amber grassland, dotted with the dark green of pistachio trees. The air smells of wild thyme and sun-warmed earth. Beneath your feet, the ground holds secrets that challenge everything we think we know about the human story. This is Göbekli Tepe. The name means potbelly hill in Turkish, an unremarkable description for what may be the most remarkable place on Earth. When archaeologists first cut into this mound in 1994, they expected to find perhaps a medieval cemetery, maybe some Byzantine ruins. What they discovered instead stopped time itself. Massive T-shaped pillars rose from the earth like silent sentinels. Some weighed 20 tons or more. Their surfaces were covered with elegant carvings of animals, abstract symbols, and strange humanoid figures with no mouths, no faces, only the suggestion of presence. The stones had been arranged in circular enclosures, one nested inside another, forming patterns that seemed to hold meaning just beyond our understanding. The dating shocked everyone. 11,600 years old, built at a time when humans were supposedly just beginning to experiment with agriculture, when settlements were crude, when civilization as we know it was still thousands of years away. And yet here were monuments that rivaled anything built in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, except they came first, thousands of years first. But what if that date is wrong? Not slightly wrong, but monumentally, impossibly wrong. What if Göbekli Tepe was not built 11,000 years ago, but 100,000 years ago? The implications would ripple backward and forward through time, unraveling the story we tell ourselves about who we are and where we came from. Let that thought settle over you like a blanket. 100,000 years. The pillars standing in darkness for so long that entire ice ages came and went. Continents of ice advanced and retreated across the northern world. Sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet. Species we can barely imagine walked the earth and then vanished forever. And through it all, these stones remained, buried beneath the earth, waiting. The question whispers through the centuries: who could have built such a place in the depths of prehistory, and why? To answer this, we must first understand what makes Göbekli Tepe so unsettling to conventional history. The site violates our expectations in almost every way. It appears before agriculture, before pottery, before cities, before writing. The people who built it, we're told, were hunter-gatherers, living in small mobile bands, following herds and gathering wild plants. And yet somehow, these supposedly simple people quarried massive stones from bedrock, transported them across rough terrain, carved them with sophisticated tools, and erected them in precise circular patterns aligned with celestial markers. The scale alone is staggering. Moving a 20-ton pillar requires coordinated effort from dozens or even hundreds of people. Carving the detailed reliefs, foxes frozen mid-leap, serpents coiling across stone, vultures with outstretched wings, demands not just artistic skill, but cultural continuity, a shared symbolic language that could be taught and remembered across generations. Mainstream archaeology explains this through the lens of social organization. Perhaps the promise of seasonal gatherings at sacred sites motivated disparate groups to come together, to pool their labor for something greater than survival. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe was the cathedral that built the civilization, not the other way around. It's a compelling theory, but it rests on that foundational date, 9600 BCE, give or take a few centuries. What if we're wrong about when it was built? The dating of Göbekli Tepe comes primarily from organic materials found in the fill, the soil that was used to deliberately bury the site. Radiocarbon dating measures the decay of carbon-14 in things that were once alive. Charcoal from fires, bone fragments, plant remains. These materials give us the date when the site was buried, sealed beneath earth and forgotten. But the stones themselves cannot be dated this way. Limestone holds no organic carbon. It endures across millennia, mute and ageless. What we date is not the construction, but the concealment. Imagine for a moment that Göbekli Tepe was built not 11,000 years ago, but 90,000 years earlier. Imagine it standing for tens of thousands of years, weathering storms, witnessing the slow turn of the heavens as constellations drifted through the sky due to the Earth's axial precession. Imagine it serving its purpose, whatever that purpose was, until finally, when catastrophe loomed, or when its meaning had been fulfilled, its guardians buried it with the same care they had used to build it. The burial itself would take place around 9600 BCE, which is what we date. But the construction could stretch back into a past so distant that our minds struggle to grasp it. This is not a proven theory. It is a thought experiment, a meditation on possibility. But as you relax deeper into stillness, let yourself wonder, what would such a deep antiquity mean? It would mean that civilization is older than we dare imagine, that humanity has risen before, perhaps many times, only to be scattered by catastrophe, that the story we tell about steady progress from cave to city is not wrong, exactly, but incomplete. One chapter in a much longer book. It would mean that when we look at Göbekli Tepe, we are not seeing the beginning of something, but the end, the last monument of a world we have forgotten. As you breathe slowly, evenly, picture the stars wheeling overhead, the same stars that look down on those ancient builders. The constellations have shifted since then. Orion has tilted. The pole star has changed. Even the stars themselves forget. But the stones, remember, they wait in silence, keeping their secrets, inviting us to imagine what once was and what might have been. Let yourself drift now, carried on the current of deep time, where 100,000 years is just a moment in the vast turning of the cosmos. In the comfortable darkness behind your closed eyes, imagine a world before our world. Not the recent past, not even the ancient past as we usually think of it, but a past so deep that it precedes the pyramids by 80,000 years. This is Earth during the late Pleistocene, roughly 100,000 years ago. If Göbekli Tepe was built then, it arose in a landscape both familiar and alien. The climate oscillated between warmer periods and frigid stretches when glaciers crept down from the poles. But in the region we now call southeastern Turkey, the land remained relatively temperate, a refuge from the ice. Rivers ran fuller than today, carving through limestone plateaus. Oak and pistachio forests covered the hillsides. The region was a crossroads of ecosystems, where steppe met woodland, where prey animals concentrated, drawing predators and humans alike. Who were the humans who might have walked these hills? At this depth of time, we enter a realm of genetic shadows and archaeological whispers. Modern humans, anatomically like us, had evolved in Africa perhaps 200,000 years earlier. By 100,000 years ago, some populations had begun dispersing, moving into the Middle East, testing the edges of new territories. But they were not the only humans. Neanderthals lived throughout Europe and Western Asia. Their robust frames adapted to cold climates. Denisovans, known mostly from fragments of bone and DNA, ranged across Asia. Other human species, some we've only recently discovered, shared the world in ways we're still piecing together. Genetic studies reveal something haunting. Ghost populations in our DNA, lineages that contributed to us but have since vanished without leaving fossils or names. These are peoples whose blood runs through our veins, but whose stories are completely lost. Could one of these populations have built Göbekli Tepe? Imagine them. A society of anatomically modern humans, biologically identical to us in every way. The same capacity for language, for abstract thought, for art and innovation. Why shouldn't they have been capable of monumental architecture? The human brain didn't suddenly upgrade 11,000 years ago. The people of 100 millennia past had the same neurons firing in the same patterns, the same ability to wonder at the stars, the same drive to create meaning from the chaos of existence. Perhaps they were nomadic, following seasonal rounds through a vast territory. But nomadic doesn't mean primitive. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia maintained one of the world's most complex cultures for over 60,000 years while remaining mobile. The Plains peoples of North America orchestrated massive communal hunts and maintained far-flung trade networks without permanent settlements. Mobility and sophistication are not opposites. This hypothetical civilization would have faced challenges that demanded ingenuity. They lived in a world populated by megafauna, massive animals that have no living equivalents. Woolly mammoths and their relatives lumbered across the steppes. Giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, cave bears that stood 12 feet tall. The aurochs, the wild ancestor of cattle, carved repeatedly on Göbekli Tepe's pillars, was itself a formidable creature, standing 6 feet at the shoulder with horns that could gore a lion. Hunting such animals required not just bravery but strategy, cooperation, and technology. Humans of this era crafted sophisticated tools from stone, bone, and wood. They understood fire intimately, using it for warmth, cooking, landscape management, and as a tool for working other materials. They created art. The cave paintings of Europe begin around 40,000 years ago. But ochre hues and shell beads stretch back much further. Hints that symbolic thinking runs deep in our lineage. But could they build Göbekli Tepe? The pillars themselves offer clues. They are carved limestone, shaped with tools that left marks too fine for simple percussion, hitting stone against stone. Some archaeologists note that the carved surfaces show signs of techniques that seem advanced for their supposed date, as if the carvers understood the stone's grain and structure with an almost geological expertise. Quarrying the pillars would require identifying suitable bedrock, then using tools and leverage to separate massive blocks from the living stone. Modern experiments have shown this is possible with stone tools, wooden wedges, water, and patience. It takes time, but time is something a society spanning millennia would have in abundance. Transportation is more challenging. 20 tons is approximately the weight of 3 adult elephants or a fully loaded cement truck. Moving such weight across even short distances without wheels or draft animals seems to demand either enormous human effort, hundreds of people pulling together, or some technique we've forgotten. Some researchers have speculated about now lost methods, using balls of stone as rollers, greasing tracks with animal fat, even employing sound resonance to reduce friction. These remain unproven, hovering in the realm between possibility and fantasy. But the fact remains that the stones were moved, were erected, were carved. The evidence stands, even as the method eludes us. Erecting the pillars upright would require careful engineering. The bases fit into carved sockets in the bedrock, slots shaped to hold the pillars at precise angles. Raising a 20-ton stone into a vertical position without it cracking or toppling demands understanding of balance, leverage, and probably some form of earthen ramp or pivot system. Again, difficult, but not impossible. What required true sophistication was the vision, seeing in your mind what needed to be built, communicating that vision to others, coordinating labor not for immediate survival, but for something intangible, ritual, memory, meaning. This is where our hypothetical lost civilization becomes most interesting. They would have needed not just technical skill, but social complexity, a shared cosmology, a reason to build. Hierarchies or consensus structures that could mobilize labor without coercion, or perhaps with it, we cannot know. A system for teaching the young, for passing knowledge across generations, for maintaining the sanctity and purpose of the site across what might have been thousands of years of use. Imagine the elders of this people, carrying in their memories the stories of how the pillars were first raised, recounting the names of the ancestors whose hands carved the dancing foxes and vigilant vultures. Imagine initiation ceremonies where the young were brought blindfolded to the stone circles, then had their blinds removed to stand in awe before the monuments their people had made. As you breathe slowly, evenly, picture yourself among them, not as an outsider, but as one who belongs. You have spent your life learning the songs that accompany the carving, the rituals that sanctify each stone. You know without thinking which stars correspond to which pillars, which animals appear in which enclosures, what stories they tell. This is your birthright, this knowledge. It was here before you were born and will persist long after you return to the earth. The stones are not just stones. They are memory made solid, time made visible, a promise that your people will endure. And then something changes. Perhaps the climate shifts, rainfall patterns alter, prey migrations change their routes. Perhaps conflict with other groups makes the region unsafe. Or perhaps something more catastrophic looms, a sign in the sky, a comet's approach, the ground itself beginning to shake with increasing frequency. The decision is made. The site must be sealed, not destroyed, but preserved. Every enclosure is carefully filled with earth and stone rubble, packed tight as though entombing something precious. The filling is not the work of erosion or abandonment. It is deliberate, laborious, performed with the same care as the original construction. Why bury your civilization's greatest achievement? To protect it from enemies, to seal away dangerous knowledge, or simply to preserve it for a future that might otherwise forget? The answer dissolves into the darkness as you drift deeper into rest. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, whether 11,000 or 100,000 years ago, are gone. Their language is silent, their faces unknown, even their name for themselves is lost. But the stones remain, and in remaining, they whisper that humanity's capacity for wonder is older than our oldest stories, deeper than our deepest memory. Let yourself sink into that vastness now. 100,000 years, 100,000 sunrises, 100,000 generations looking up at the same stars. And somewhere in that incomprehensible stretch of time, hands like yours shaped stone and left behind a question. Allow your awareness to expand upward now, through the ceiling, through the atmosphere, into the infinite black scattered with ancient light. The stars you see tonight are the same stars they saw, give or take the slow drift of cosmic time. One of the most compelling mysteries of Göbekli Tepe is its relationship with the heavens. The site is not just aligned randomly. Multiple researchers have noted that certain pillars, certain enclosures, seem to track significant celestial events. Solstices, equinoxes, the rising points of particular stars. If the site is 100,000 years old, this astronomical precision becomes even more remarkable and more difficult to explain. The Earth wobbles as it spins. This axial precession causes the position of stars to shift slowly against the background of the sky, completing a full cycle roughly every 26,000 years. Over the span of 100,000 years, the night sky would transform dramatically. The North Star would not be Polaris. The constellations would appear in different positions. The alignment we see today would be meaningless. And yet, what if the alignments encoded in Göbekli Tepe refer not to the sky of 9600 BCE, but to an earlier celestial configuration? Consider Pillar 43, perhaps the most famous carved stone at the site. Its surface teems with imagery: a scorpion, several birds that might be vultures, spheres and crescents, a headless human figure, and abstract symbols whose meaning eludes us. Some researchers have interpreted this pillar as a star map, a snapshot of the sky at a particular moment in time. The scorpion has been linked to the constellation Scorpius, the vultures to Cygnus, or perhaps to other configurations. The spheres might represent stars, planets, or something else entirely. The sun, the moon, comets, symbols of cosmic forces. If we accept the conventional date, the pillar might depict the sky as it appeared around 10,950 BCE, during the Younger Dryas event, a period of rapid climate change. But what if we wind the cosmic clock back further? At 100,000 years ago, the constellations as we know them would be distorted. Orion, so prominent in ancient cultures worldwide, would be tilted differently. The bright stars we use as markers, Sirius, Betelgeuse, Rigel, would occupy different relative positions. To encode the sky of that era would require not just careful observation over generations, but an understanding of celestial mechanics sophisticated enough to know that these positions would change, that the sky itself is not fixed but slowly turning. Why would any civilization bother? One answer is legacy. If you know catastrophe is coming, if you understand that your world will be swept away, then encoding your astronomical knowledge in stone is a way of proving your existence to whatever comes after. The stars are universal. Any sufficiently advanced culture will study them. A star map is a message that transcends language. Another answer is practical. Astronomy was humanity's first science, the foundation of calendars, navigation, agriculture. Knowing when seasons would shift, when floods would come, when to plant or migrate, these insights meant survival. A culture with deep astronomical knowledge would have significant advantages. But there's a third possibility, one that edges into the mystical. Perhaps these ancient people saw the stars not just as navigation aids or calendar markers, but as meaningful in themselves. Perhaps they believed the sky was a story, a myth written in light, and that by mirroring it in stone, they were participating in something sacred. Many ancient cultures believed that what happens in the heavens is reflected on earth, and vice versa. As above, so below, is one of the oldest philosophical principles, appearing in various forms across civilizations. The Egyptians aligned the pyramids with Orion's belt, seeing in that constellation the dwelling place of Osiris. The Maya tracked Venus with obsessive precision, believing its cycles foretold war and transformation. Aboriginal Australians encoded the positions of stars in songlines, oral maps that served as both navigation and sacred text. Göbekli Tepe might belong to this tradition, or might even be its origin. Imagine the sight at night, 100,000 years ago. No light pollution dims the stars. The Milky Way blazes overhead like a river of fire. In the center of the stone circles, shamans or priests conduct rituals synchronized with celestial events. As certain stars rise, certain chants are sung. As planets move through specific constellations, offerings are made, stories are told. The enclosures themselves might function as observational instruments. Stand in the center, sight along the edge of a particular pillar, and you mark the rising point of a star at a particular time of year. The stones become a calendar, a clock, an astronomical computer built from limestone and patience. This would require multiple generations of observers, each passing knowledge to the next. Precession is slow, almost imperceptible in a single lifetime. To track it demands centuries of continuous observation, carefully recorded and transmitted. This implies not just intelligence but cultural stability, institutions that could outlast individuals, systems of education and memory. How might such knowledge be preserved without writing? Through story, through song, through ritual that encodes information in memorable forms. Many pre-literate cultures maintain staggering amounts of precise information this way. Polynesian navigators could sail thousands of miles across open ocean, using only star knowledge and wave patterns, information passed down through generations without written text. Indigenous Australian cultures preserved accurate geological and climatic information spanning 10,000 years or more through oral tradition. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe served as a physical mnemonic, a three-dimensional text where each pillar, each carving, each alignment was a chapter in a larger book of the sky. The animals carved into the pillars might also relate to astronomy. Many cultures group stars into constellations named after animals: the lion, the bull, the scorpion. The creatures depicted at Göbekli Tepe, foxes, boars, serpents, cranes, vultures, might represent not just the fauna of the region, but celestial patterns, markers for navigating the night sky. As you relax more deeply, imagine yourself standing in that ancient circle, beneath those ancient stars. The stone is cool against your back. Above, the sky wheels slowly, imperceptibly, marking time in ways beyond human comprehension. You feel small and yet connected, a brief consciousness, witnessing the eternal dance. The elders point upward, showing you patterns. That cluster is the fox, they say, and when it rises before dawn, the herds will return to the northern valleys. Or perhaps, when the vulture star reaches its zenith, the door between worlds opens, and we may speak with ancestors. You learn these patterns as you learned language, absorbing them without conscious effort. The sky becomes legible, a text you can read, a story you inhabit. And when the time comes to seal the site, to bury the knowledge, perhaps the final act is to carve one last star map, one final record that says, "This is what we knew, this is what we saw, remember us." The stars continue their slow procession, indifferent to human dramas, to civilizations that rise and fall beneath their light. They shine on the buried stones of Göbekli Tepe for tens of thousands of years, until finally, archaeologists in the 21st century cut into the mound and release its secrets into light once more. But secrets, once buried, are never completely revealed. The stones speak, but we understand only fragments. The star maps remain, but the key to reading them is lost. Unless we remember, unless somewhere in our genetic memory, in the deep structures of the human mind, the knowledge persists, waiting to be awakened. Breathe deeply. Let the starlight above and the darkness below merge into a single vast space. You are floating in it, suspended between earth and sky, between past and future. The stars watch. They have always watched. And in their patient light, 100,000 years is barely a moment. Let your mind settle now on the carvings themselves, those enigmatic images that cover the pillars like a script we can almost but not quite read. As you relax more deeply, picture yourself running your fingers across the stone, feeling the grooves where tools once worked, tracing the outlines of animals and symbols. The reliefs at Göbekli Tepe are not crude or hesitant. They are confident, elegant, rendered with an artistic skill that suggests long practice. These are not the first attempts of a culture experimenting with carving. They are the mature works of an established tradition. The animals appear in seemingly endless variety. Foxes are especially common, their bushy tails and pointed ears unmistakable. Boars, their bristling backs caught mid-charge, gazelles leaping, snakes coiling, scorpions with raised stingers, vultures with outstretched wings, cranes in elegant poses, lions stalking, cattle, aurochs massive and powerful. Some of these animals still live in the region. Others vanished long ago. The aurochs, the wild cattle that appear again and again in the carvings, went extinct in the 17th century, the last known individual dying in a Polish forest. But they once roamed widely, formidable creatures that stood 6 feet at the shoulder with horns that could span 3 feet across. To hunt them would require courage and coordination. The presence of extinct or extirpated animals on the pillars could support an earlier date. If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, the fauna depicted would be even more archaic, perhaps including species we know only from fossils. Imagine carvings of creatures we've never seen alive, their forms preserved in stone as perfectly as any fossil in amber. But the animals might be more than documentary. In shamanic cultures worldwide, animals serve as symbols, as spirit guides, as representatives of forces beyond the physical. The fox might represent cunning or adaptability, the vulture, death and transformation, the serpent, rebirth and wisdom, the scorpion, danger and protection. If we view the carvings as a symbolic language, then Göbekli Tepe becomes a text, a sacred scripture written in stone. Each animal, each arrangement, each enclosure might tell a story or encode a teaching. Consider the vultures. They appear frequently, often holding spherical objects in their wings or claws. Vultures are carrion birds, feeders on the dead. But in many cultures, they are also psychopomps, guides of souls to the afterlife. In Tibetan sky burial, the dead are given to vultures, a practice seen as returning the body to the cycle of life. In ancient Egypt, the vulture goddess Nekbet represented protection and royal power. At Göbekli Tepe, the vultures sometimes hover over headless human figures. One pillar shows a clearly anthropomorphic shape without a head, the body seemingly at rest or perhaps deceased. Is this a depiction of death ritual? A representation of the soul departing the body, or something else? An astronomical allegory, perhaps, with the headless figure representing the earth and the vulture the sky. The spheres the vultures hold might be stars, comets, eggs, seeds, symbols of potential, of life continuing even through death. Or they might be entirely abstract, geometric shapes that carried meaning in a symbolic system we no longer understand. Then there are the H-shaped symbols, abstract geometric forms that appear on several pillars. These are particularly intriguing because similar shapes appear at other ancient sites around the world, most notably at Pumapunku in Bolivia. The connection is probably coincidental. The sites are separated by vast distances and many thousands of years even in conventional chronology. But the recurrence is striking. What could an H represent? In modern semiotics, it suggests balance, a doorway, a link between two sides. Some researchers speculate it might represent a portal, a threshold between worlds or states of being. Others suggest it's a schematic representation of a physical structure, perhaps a building, a gate, or even a tool or device we no longer recognize. The abstract symbols at Göbekli Tepe include other geometric forms: circles, crescents, lines, V-shapes, zigzags. These could be decorative, but in the context of a site with such evident symbolic density, it's hard to believe they're mere ornamentation. Some researchers have suggested these symbols represent proto-writing, a precursor to the written scripts that would emerge thousands of years later in Mesopotamia. If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, this would push the origins of symbolic notation back to an almost unimaginable antiquity. Writing, as we usually define it, is a system of visible marks that correspond to language, allowing the recording of speech. The earliest known writing systems, Sumerian cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs, date to around 3200 BCE, roughly 5,000 years ago. But various forms of notation and symbolic marking stretch back much further. Tally marks on bones from Africa date to over 40,000 years ago. Cave paintings in Europe, Asia, and Australia preserve symbols that might encode information beyond simple representation. Geometric shapes, patterns of dots, handprints. These recur across continents in ways that suggest shared meaning, or at least shared cognitive impulses. If the abstract symbols at Göbekli Tepe are a form of notation, what information might they encode? Astronomical data, as discussed earlier. Ritual instructions, calendar markers, resource locations, genealogies, myths. The problem is that without a key, without a Rosetta Stone that connects these symbols to a known language, we can only speculate. But speculation can be productive. As you sink deeper into relaxation, imagine the symbols coming alive, glowing faintly, each one pulsing with meaning. You understand instinctively, without translation, that the circle means cycle, continuity. The crescent means change, transformation. The H means passage, threshold, balance. The humanoid figures are perhaps the most mysterious carvings. They appear in various forms across the site. Some are clearly anthropomorphic, with recognizable bodies, arms, legs. But they lack faces. No eyes, no mouths, no expressions. Just blank surfaces where faces should be. This facelessness is deeply uncanny. It suggests anonymity, universality. These are not portraits of individuals, but representations of humanity as a type. Or perhaps they represent something beyond humanity, beings from another realm, ancestors, spirits, or gods. Some of the figures wear what appear to be belts or loincloth-like garments, details that suggest these are not generic humans, but specific types, priests perhaps, or shamans, or members of a particular clan or order. The presence of clothing is significant. It implies culture, status, identity. One interpretation is that these faceless figures represent the initiates themselves, the people who came to Göbekli Tepe for ritual. By erasing individual features, the carvings become mirrors, allowing anyone to see themselves in the stone. Another interpretation is more unsettling. Perhaps these figures represent the builder's understanding of beings from elsewhere. In shamanic experiences, in mystical visions, entities are often described as humanoid but not quite human, lacking features or possessing features that unsettle our expectations. If the builders of Göbekli Tepe encountered such beings, in dreams, in trance states, or perhaps in reality, the faceless figures might be their attempt to depict the indescribable. This edges into the realm of high strangeness, but it's worth considering. Many ancient cultures speak of teachers who came from elsewhere, gods or ancestors who brought knowledge. These stories are usually dismissed as myth, but myths often preserve kernels of historical memory, distorted by time but rooted in something real. As you breathe slowly, evenly, picture yourself standing before one of these faceless figures carved in stone. You reach out, touch the smooth surface where a face should be, and in that moment, you see yourself reflected, your own face appearing in the stone, as if the carving is teaching you that you and the figure are the same, separated only by time. The carvings cover the pillars like a language waiting to be read. Animals, symbols, figures, they interweave, forming patterns that tease the edge of meaning. We can identify the individual elements, but the grammar eludes us. If Göbekli Tepe is 100,000 years old, then this symbolic system represents one of humanity's earliest attempts to encode complex ideas in permanent form, to create meaning that outlasts the individual, the generation, the culture itself. And it succeeded. The symbols endure, the carvings remain, and we, thousands of generations removed, still stand before them, still trying to understand, still feeling the pull of recognition, the sense that we should know this language, that somewhere deep in our minds we do. Let the symbols fade now into the darkness behind your eyes. Let them become abstract patterns, beautiful and meaningless, or meaningful in ways beyond words. The stone remembers what we have forgotten, and in remembering, it invites us to dream. Your awareness expands now, spreading like ripples across water, reaching out from Göbekli Tepe to touch other ancient sites, other mysteries that dot the globe like breadcrumbs leading back to a common source. If a civilization existed 100,000 years ago, capable of building Göbekli Tepe, would they have left traces elsewhere? Would there be other monuments, other sites that whisper of the same forgotten people? Perhaps there are, but erosion, tectonic shifts, rising seas, and the sheer weight of time have erased most evidence. Stone crumbles, wood rots, even metal corrodes to nothing given enough centuries. What we have are fragments, anomalies, sites that don't quite fit the timelines we've constructed. Consider Pumapunku in Bolivia, part of the larger Tiwanaku site. Officially dated to around 536 CE, Pumapunku features H-shaped andesite blocks cut with such precision that they interlock without mortar. The surfaces are flat to within tolerances that would be challenging even with modern machinery. Some blocks weigh over 100 tons. The conventional explanation is that the Tiwanaku people use simple tools and lots of time. The unconventional explanation is that the site is much older, that later cultures built on top of earlier foundations, and that the precision stonework belongs to a civilization we don't yet understand. Halfway around the world, off the coast of Japan, lies Yonaguni, a submerged rock formation that has sparked decades of debate. Discovered in 1986 by a diver, Yonaguni features terraces, straight edges, right angles, and what appear to be carved steps descending into the deep. Geologists argue it's natural, the result of erosion and tectonic fracturing. Others insist it's artificial, the remains of a structure built when sea levels were lower, before the end of the last ice age. If Yonaguni is man-made, it must predate the flooding that submerged it, placing its construction at least 10,000 years ago, possibly much earlier. The city would have stood on dry land, a coastal settlement, subsequently drowned by rising seas. In Indonesia, Gunung Padang presents another enigma. What appears to be a natural hill conceals layers of stone terraces, some of which have been radiocarbon dated to nearly 28,000 years ago, based on organic material found between the stones. Deeper layers remain unexcavated, their age unknown. The site features megalithic structures, chambers, and alignments that suggest deliberate construction. These sites, Göbekli Tepe, Pumapunku, Yonaguni, Gunung Padang, are separated by thousands of miles and, in conventional chronology, by thousands of years. And yet they share curious similarities. Massive stones precisely fitted, alignments with celestial markers, evidence of burial or concealment, and ages that push uncomfortably against the boundaries of established history. Could these be nodes in a forgotten network, remnants of a global civilization that existed before the Ice Age ended, and whose memory survives only in scattered monuments and myth? The idea of a lost global civilization is not new. Plato wrote about Atlantis, a powerful island nation that sank beneath the waves. Hindu texts speak of Dvarka, a city swallowed by the sea. Polynesian legends tell of Mu or Lemuria, sunken continents in the Pacific. Nearly every culture has flood myths, stories of a time when the world was drowned and only a few survived to begin again. For a long time, these were dismissed as purely mythological, allegories about divine punishment, or the cycles of destruction and renewal. But as sea levels rose dramatically at the end of the last ice age, entire coastlines and low-lying regions were indeed submerged. If humans had settled these areas, as they almost certainly did, since coastlines are rich in resources, then entire worlds of human culture now lie beneath hundreds of feet of water. Archaeological evidence is mounting. Submerged sites have been found in the Mediterranean, off the coast of India, near Cuba, and along the continental shelves worldwide. Most are difficult to date and harder still to excavate underwater. But their existence proves that we are missing chapters of the human story, chapters literally drowned by rising seas. If Göbekli Tepe belongs to this lost world, it survived only because it was inland, high enough to escape the floods, and deliberately buried to protect it from whatever came next. The symbols carved at these various sites show intriguing parallels. Spirals appear at Göbekli Tepe, at Newgrange in Ireland, in the American Southwest, at sites in Malta, and in Aboriginal rock art in Australia. The spiral is a universal symbol, appearing independently in many cultures. But its ubiquity still raises questions. Does it represent the same thing everywhere? Cycles of time, the turning of seasons, the shape of galaxies, the journey inward to consciousness. The 8 shapes mentioned earlier appear not just at Göbekli Tepe and Pumapunku, but in other contexts as well. Serpent imagery is nearly universal in ancient iconography, from the feathered serpents of Mesoamerica to the Nagas of India to the rainbow serpent of Aboriginal Australia. Are these coincidences, or do they hint at a shared symbolic vocabulary that once connected distant peoples? One possibility is that these similarities arise from the structure of the human mind itself. We all share the same basic neurology, the same pattern-seeking consciousness. Certain symbols, circles, spirals, crosses, zigzags, emerge naturally from the way our brains process visual information. This could explain why they appear across cultures without requiring contact. But another possibility is diffusion, the spread of ideas through contact, trade, or migration. If a sophisticated culture existed 100,000 years ago, with seafaring capabilities and astronomical knowledge, they might have established outposts or colonies across the globe. Their symbolic system, their architectural techniques, their cosmological understanding could have been carried to distant shores. When catastrophe struck, whether flood, climate shift, or cosmic impact, the network collapsed. Survivors scattered, carrying fragments of knowledge into new regions. Over millennia, the original unified culture fractured into separate peoples, each preserving different pieces of the whole. The myths, the symbols, the monuments, these are the shards of a broken mirror, each reflecting part of a larger image we can no longer see complete. This is speculative, of course, but as you relax deeper into stillness, allow yourself to imagine it. Picture a world where ships sailed between continents, where knowledge flowed across oceans, where the builders of Göbekli Tepe were in contact with builders in Japan, in Indonesia, in South America. Picture the exchange of ideas. A symbol devised in Anatolia appears on a monument in Bolivia. An astronomical calculation made in the Pacific is confirmed by observers in the Mediterranean. The world is vast, but knowledge makes it smaller, connects disparate peoples into a web of understanding. And then the catastrophe. Perhaps a comet impact, perhaps a rapid climate shift, perhaps a combination of disasters that compounded into civilizational collapse. The network breaks. Ships stop sailing. Trade routes disappear. Settlements are abandoned or destroyed. The few survivors cling to life in scattered pockets, their grand civilization reduced to memory. Over generations, the memory becomes myth. The actual events are transformed into stories of gods and heroes, of golden ages and falls from grace. The technical knowledge, how to navigate by stars, how to carve stone with precision, how to align monuments with celestial markers, is gradually lost. What remains are the stories and the ruins endure. Stone is patient. It waits through ice ages and then floods, through the rise and fall of subsequent civilizations, through our own modern rediscovery of the past. When we excavate these sites, we're not just uncovering stones. We're touching the fingertips of ancestors reaching across an abyss of time. The similarities between distant sites might be echoes, reverberations of a single note played so long ago that we've forgotten the original sound. We hear only its ghost, carried forward through stone and symbol, through myth and memory. Or perhaps the similarities are coincidences, the inevitable result of human minds solving similar problems in similar ways. Perhaps there was no global civilization, no lost golden age, just the slow, independent development of cultures across the world, each reaching similar conclusions from similar starting points. The truth likely lies somewhere between these extremes, There may have been contact between ancient peoples far earlier and more extensively than we've proven. There may have been sharing of ideas, trade in goods and symbols. But whether these connections were organized into a true global civilization or were more sporadic, more fragmented, is unclear. What is clear is that Göbekli Tepe is not alone. It stands as part of a constellation of ancient mysteries that challenge our understanding of the past. And if it truly dates to 100,000 years ago, it would be the oldest star in that constellation, the first light in a long night of forgotten history. Breathe slowly now. Let your awareness settle back into your body, into this moment. The world's mysteries remain mysteries, but there is comfort in that. Not everything must be explained. Not every question must be answered tonight. The stones stand, the symbols endure, and somewhere, in the great web of time and space, connections pulse like distant stars, too faint to see clearly, but present nonetheless, shaping the darkness. Return now to the hill itself, to Göbekli Tepe standing in the Turkish highlands, and consider the strangest aspect of its story, the deliberate burial. This was not abandonment. This was not the gradual accumulation of wind-blown dust or the collapse of ruined walls. This was intentional, methodical concealment. Every enclosure filled with earth and stone rubble, packed carefully, sealed completely. The effort required to bury the site was roughly equal to the effort required to build it. Why? The conventional explanation is ritual closure. Many ancient cultures practiced the deliberate burial of sacred sites when their purpose was fulfilled, or when it was time to build anew. Temples in Mesoamerica were sometimes filled, and then new temples constructed on top, creating layers of architecture that accumulated over centuries. But Göbekli Tepe was not built over. It was simply buried and left. The mound stood for thousands of years, unremarkable to the eye, its secrets sleeping beneath the earth. This suggests a different motive: preservation. If the site is 100,000 years old, the burial might have occurred much later, perhaps during a crisis that threatened the entire region. Imagine a people who had maintained Göbekli Tepe for tens of thousands of years, generation after generation returning to perform rituals, to make observations, to teach the young. The site was their anchor, their library, their connection to ancestors stretching back into the mists of deep time. And then the signs appeared. Maybe the climate shifted rapidly, temperatures plunging or soaring beyond tolerable ranges. Maybe earthquakes began shaking the region with increasing frequency, suggesting something larger was building. Maybe the sky itself provided warning. A comet visible in daylight, growing larger each night, its tail stretching across the heavens like a wound. The decision would be agonizing. Leave the site exposed and risk its destruction, or bury it, seal it away, preserve it for a future that might never come. They chose burial. Picture the community gathering, perhaps for the last time. Elders lead rituals of closure, chanting prayers that have been passed down for millennia. Younger members begin the work, carrying baskets of earth, pouring them into the enclosures. The carvings disappear slowly beneath the soil. First the bases of the pillars, then the reliefs of animals, finally the tops of the stones themselves. It takes weeks, perhaps months. The work is somber, ritualistic. Each basket of earth is blessed. Songs are sung to thank the stones for their service, to ask them to sleep and wait. Children watch, not fully understanding, but sensing the gravity, the finality. When the last stone is covered, when the mound is complete, the people turn away. Some may never return to the region, migrating to safer lands. Others might stay nearby, maintaining a vigil, passing down stories of what lies beneath the hill. But over generations even, that knowledge fades. The stories become vague, then mythical, then forgotten entirely. The hill remains, silent and still, through the millennia that follow. If catastrophe did strike, flood, fire, climate collapse, the burial would prove prescient. Sites left exposed would erode, collapse, be swept away by rising waters, or buried beneath layers of sediment and debris. But Göbekli Tepe, already sealed, would endure. Its burial became its salvation. This suggests remarkable foresight, an understanding that the present moment was not permanent, that change, terrible change, was coming. Such understanding could come from experience. If this civilization had already lived through previous catastrophes, if their history included cycles of destruction and survival, they would know to prepare. The astronomical alignments at the site might have served as early warning systems. If the builders tracked celestial cycles over thousands of years, they might have recognized patterns, might have understood that certain configurations portended danger. A comet returning on a periodic orbit, an alignment of planets that coincided with past catastrophes, the slow weakening of Earth's magnetic field, making the planet vulnerable to cosmic radiation and solar storms. Armed with this knowledge, the burial becomes not superstition, but rational precaution. Preserve what can be preserved. Hide knowledge until the danger passes. Create a time capsule for those who come after. The silence that followed the burial is almost as profound as the burial itself. For thousands of years, whether 11,000 or 100,000, the site lay undisturbed. Empires rose and fell across the Middle East. Sumeria, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, the Hittites, the Persians, Alexander's Greeks, Rome, Byzantium, the Islamic Caliphates, the Ottoman Empire. All of them dominated the region at various times. None of them knew what lay beneath the unremarkable hill. Even when people settled nearby, when shepherds grazed their flocks on the mound, when farmers ploughed fields at its base, the secret held. The stones beneath slept on, their carvings unseen, their message unread. This silence is itself a kind of preservation. If the site had been discovered in ancient times, it might have been plundered for building stone, or destroyed by conquerors who saw it as a rival religion's temple. By remaining hidden, it survived intact. There's a poignancy to this. The builders buried their greatest achievement, hoping it would be found again, hoping their message would reach across time. But they couldn't know when or if that discovery would happen. For all they knew, the stones might sleep forever, their sacrifice meaningless, their knowledge lost. And yet they did it anyway. They entombed their temple, sealed their secrets, and walked away, leaving only the earth and sky as witnesses. As you breathe slowly, deeply, consider the courage that required to create something magnificent and then hide it, to possess knowledge and then bury it, to hope that strangers in an unimaginable future would one day care enough to dig, to study, to remember. That future arrived in 1994. A German archaeologist, Klaus Schmidt, followed up on a brief survey from the 1960s that had noted ancient flint scattered on the hillside. When excavation began, the pillars emerged like fingers pushing up through soil, reaching toward the light after an eternity of darkness. The discovery stunned the archaeological world. Here was a complex, sophisticated site that predated agriculture, that challenged every assumption about the development of civilization. And as the work continued, as more enclosures were uncovered, the mystery deepened. But vast portions of the site remain unexcavated. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed additional structures still buried, perhaps dozens more enclosures waiting beneath the earth. Some researchers estimate that only 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been uncovered. What lies in that other 95%? More carvings, more alignments, artifacts that might help date the site with greater precision. Chambers containing objects that could revolutionize our understanding of the past. We don't know. The excavation proceeds slowly, carefully, constrained by funding, by politics, by the sheer difficulty of the work, and perhaps by caution, a reluctance to disturb what has slept so long. There are also whispers, rumors that swirl around many major archaeological sites. Stories of artifacts removed quietly, of discoveries suppressed, of evidence that contradicts official narratives. These are difficult to verify, often rooted more in conspiracy thinking than in fact, but they persist, feeding into a broader cultural sense that we're not being told the whole truth about the past. Whether or not such suppression occurs, the effect is the same. The full story of Göbekli Tepe remains incomplete. The silence that began with the burial continues in a new form. Not the silence of earth, but the silence of unanswered questions, of unshared knowledge, of mysteries that resist solution. As you drift deeper into rest, let that silence envelop you. It is not an absence, but a presence, a pregnant pause filled with possibility. The stones sleep beneath their partial covering of earth, dreaming whatever stones dream, holding their secrets close. And in that silence, in that darkness, they wait, patient as only stone can be. They waited tens of thousands of years for us to find them. They can wait a little longer for us to understand them. Let yourself wait with them now. Let questions dissolve into stillness. Let the need for answers fade into the soft darkness behind your eyes. The stones are here. That is enough. The mystery endures. That too is enough. Sleep, like the buried stones, is its own kind of burial. A temporary concealment, a retreat from the world. And like the stones, you will rise again, returning to light and awareness when the time is right. For now, rest. The ancient hill keeps its vigil. You need not keep yours.